Hey everyone, hope you're doing great. Welcome back to my channel. In today's video, we'll dive into what if Deku became the new leader of the Young Avengers. Smash that subscribe button, and be sure to peek at the description below. Let's begin. Pain was the first sensation. A deep, grinding agony that felt less like an injury and more like the universe was attempting to unright him, one atom at a time. It was a symphony of torment, conducted by the screech of tearing reality. Colors that had no name bled into one another, forming impossible geometries that twisted his perception inside out. Sound was a distorted shriek, the voices of his friends, Uraraka's desperate cry, Kaken's furious roar, All Might's encouraging echo, all stretched and warped into a single, unending note of farewell. Izuku Midoriya, Deku, the ninth inheritor of One for All, was falling. He wasn't falling down, not in any traditional sense. He was falling through the cracks in everything, through a wound in the world he had fought so desperately to save. Flashes of memory, sharp as broken glass, cut through the kaleidoscopic chaos. The crumbling cityscape of Muzurifu. The sky, choked with dust and the acrid smoke of 1,000 fires. Tamura Shigaraki, a monstrous avatar of decay, his body a grotesque canvas of stolen quirks. And All for One, the shadow behind it all, his final gambit twisting the very fabric of existence. There had been a desperate final surge. One for All had responded, a maelstrom of emerald light and the roaring chorus of the vestiges within him, meeting the catastrophic power of the quirk singularity All for One was trying to weaponize. It was a clash of absolutes. The power to save versus the power to erase. And in that impossible collision, something had broken. Not him. Not the villain. The world itself. He remembered a feeling of being hooked, not by Black Whip, but by the universe itself, and then pulled. He saw Uraraka's outstretched hand, her face a mask of horror, shrinking into a pinprick of light. He felt the legacy of One for All, Nana Shimura's float, Haikyuu Shinomori's danger sense, and smokescreen, all flaring wildly, trying to anchor him to a reality that was actively ejecting him. Hold on, kid! The second's voice had rasped in his mind, a frantic, fading whisper. Don't let go! But there was nothing to hold on to. Then, the tearing stopped. The violent symphony of uncreation ceased, replaced by a new, equally terrifying sensation, gravity. Real, physical, pull you to your doom gravity. The swirling vortex spat him out, and the world resolved itself with a nauseating lurch. He was in the sky. A sky that was too blue, too clear, dotted with puffy white clouds that seemed insultingly peaceful. Below him was a city, a sprawling, gargantuan metropolis of glass and steel that dwarfed anything he had ever seen. It was a concrete canyon of impossible heights, a testament to a world he did not recognize. The air was thick with a cacophony of new sounds, a constant blare of horns, the distant wail of a different kind of siren, a low thrum of unimaginable human density. His hero costume, already a tattered testament to the final war, was in ribbons. The armored plates were cracked, his cowl was gone, and the green fabric was scorched and torn, exposing bruised and bloodied skin. Green lightning, the chaotic energy of a fully unleashed One for All, still arced across his body, a visible sign of the power raging under his skin just to keep him conscious. Training, brutal and instinctual, took over. His fall was accelerating. He was a meteor aimed at the heart of this strange new world. Float. The thought was a desperate prayer. Nana Shimura's quirk answered, sluggishly at first, then with a jolt. His plummet slowed, the deadly acceleration bleeding away into a controlled descent. But he was still moving too fast. Inertia was a cruel master. Air Force. He cupped his hands, flicking his fingers to release small, precise bursts of pressurized air. It wasn't a Delaware smash. It was a series of rapid-fire retro-rockets, each one carefully calculated to bleed more speed without causing a destructive shockwave. The ground rushed up to meet him, a street so bright with colossal, flashing screens that it looked like a canyon of captured stars. Times Square, though he didn't know its name, was a sensory assault. Images of smiling faces selling sugary drinks, trailers for movies he'd never heard of, scrolling lines of text in a language he vaguely recognized but couldn't quite place. It was overwhelming, a digital nightmare. He aimed for a small patch of asphalt, trying to avoid the crowds of terrified people below who were now pointing, screaming, and scattering like ants. His landing was still too hard. His boots hit the pavement with a sickening crack that spiderwebbed the asphalt for 20 feet in every direction. A nearby newsstand buckled, its windows shattering. The alarm of a bright yellow taxicab began to shriek, adding to the symphony of chaos. He fell to one knee, gasping. Every muscle screamed. His head swam with vertigo and the phantom sensation of dimensional tearing. One for all pulsed under his skin, a wild, untamed beast. The vestiges were there, but they were silent, hushed and distant, as if they too were in shock. He was alone. Utterly and completely alone. The world around him was a blur of motion and noise. People were running away from him. He could hear their shouts, panicked and sharp. He saw the little black rectangles in their hands, all pointed at him. Cameras. They were filming him. In his world, that might have been followed by cheers. Here, it was accompanied by terror. He was not a savior. He was the disaster. He pushed himself to his feet, swaying. His vision swam. Where was he? What was this place? Where were his friends? The questions hammered at the inside of his skull, but no answers came. He was a shipwrecked sailor on an alien shore, and the tide was made of fear. Then, through the haze of his own pain and confusion, he heard a different kind of scream. Not one of terror at his arrival, but one of genuine, immediate distress. It was a woman's voice, sharp with fear, followed by the frightened cry of a child. It cut through everything. The dimensional sickness, the grief, the disorientation. It was a signal, a frequency his very soul was tuned to. Someone was in trouble. Without a second thought, his body moved. He pushed off the cracked pavement, the motion fluid despite his injuries. The crowd parted before him, a sea of frightened faces. He followed the sound, his eyes scanning, analyzing, processing. There. In an alley between a theater showing a musical about a historical figure he never heard of and a souvenir shop selling I Red Heart New York shirts. Two men, gaunt and desperate, had a family cornered. A mother, a father, and a small boy clutching a garish red toy. One of the men held a grimy switchblade, its edge glinting under the glare of the billboards. The wallet! And the phone! Now! The man with the knife snarled, his voice a low growl. The father was trying to shield his family, his hands raised placatingly. The mother clutched her son, whose small face was streaked with tears. Deku's mind, the one that had analyzed countless villains and formulated 1,000 strategies, went into overdrive. Two assailants. One armed with a blade, primary threat. Victims are cornered, no escape route. Civilian presence high but panicked and disorganized. Goal, neutralize threat, protect victims, minimize collateral damage. The thoughts weren't even conscious. They were instinct, honed by years of relentless training and life-or-death combat. The man with the knife lunged, not at the father, but at the mother's purse. It was a clumsy, telegraphed move born of desperation. For Deku, time seemed to slow to a crawl. He saw the trajectory of the blade. He saw the fear in the mother's eyes. He saw the boy flinch. He saw it all. He was already moving. He didn't power up to 100%. He didn't even need 20%. One for all flared, and he channeled a precise, controlled 8% into his body. Green lightning, once a chaotic storm, now coiled around his limbs like obedient serpents. He closed the 30-foot distance in less than a second. He was a green blur, a phantom that the muggers didn't even register until it was too late. He didn't throw a punch. A punch, even at 8%, could be lethal to a normal man. He'd learned that lesson the hard way. Instead, he flicked his middle finger, channeling the power into a single, focused point. Delaware Smash, Air Force. The name was a whisper, a habit. A compressed cannonball of air, no larger than a fist, erupted from his fingertip. It was perfectly aimed. It struck not the man, but the knife hand. The impact was sharp and decisive, a violent slap from an invisible giant. There was a crack of displaced air, and the switchblade was ripped from the mugger's grasp, sent clattering harmlessly against the brick wall 50 feet down the alley. The man cried out, clutching his wrist, which was now throbbing and numb but unbroken. The second mugger, startled, turned to face the newcomer. His eyes went wide as he saw the boy in the tattered green costume, crackling with emerald energy, his green eyes burning with an intensity that promised a world of pain. The thug froze, his brain unable to process what he was seeing. Deku didn't give him time to recover. He took another step, a single, silent stride that placed him directly in front of the second man. He raised a hand, palm open, and simply held it inches from the man's face. He said nothing. The silent threat, the sheer proximity of the overwhelming power radiating from him, was more terrifying than any shout. The man's bravado evaporated. He squeaked, stumbled backwards, tripped over his own feet, and scrambled away, disappearing into the panicked crowds. His partner, clutching his wrist, followed suit, casting one last terrified glance at the silent, glowing boy before vanishing. The alley fell silent, save for the distant city noise and the shuddering breaths of the family. Deku turned to them, the green lightning receding slightly. He offered a small, reassuring smile, though he was sure it looked more like a grimace of pain on his battered face. "Are you all right?" he asked, his voice hoarse. The words came out in Japanese. The family just stared at him, their expressions a mixture of awe, gratitude, and utter confusion. The father stammered something in English, a language Deku only had a rudimentary, classroom-level understanding of. But the tone was clear. It was thanks. The little boy, no longer crying, peeked out from behind his mother's legs. He looked at Deku's torn costume, at the faint green glow in his eyes, and then he smiled, a bright, innocent grin. He held up his red toy. It was a plastic figure of a man in a red and blue suit with a shield. Deku's smile became a little more genuine. A hero. He understood that, at least. He gave a small nod, a universal gesture. He had done his job. He had saved someone. For a single, fleeting moment, the crushing weight of his displacement eased. This he knew. This he could do. It was in that moment of connection, that brief respite, that a new shadow fell over the alley entrance. Up on a rooftop overlooking the chaos, the young Avengers were trying to make sense of the situation. They hadn't arrived via a flashy Quinjet. America Chavez had simply punched a star-shaped hole in reality from their base in the refurbished Avengers mansion, and they had stepped through onto the roof of the Marriott Marquis, giving them a perfect vantage point. "Okay, status report," Kate Bishop Hawkeye said, her voice crisp and authoritative. She had an arrow nocked, though not drawn. Her eyes narrowed as she scanned the scene below through high-tech binoculars. "Billy, what are we looking at?" Energy-wise, Billy Kaplan, Wiccan, had his eyes closed, his hands glowing with a soft, cerulean light. The raw power emanating from the epicenter of the disturbance was making his teeth ache. It was unlike anything he had ever felt. It wasn't magic, not exactly. It wasn't cosmic. It wasn't mutant energy. "It's Lao," Billy said, grimacing. "It feels like a paradox. Like a legacy of 9 different souls all crammed into one person, all screaming at once. But they're not ghosts. They're part of him, and the power source itself feels unstable, like a tear in the universe is being held together by sheer force of will. So, a ticking time bomb." "Got it," Eli Bradley, Patriot, grunted. He stood with his arms crossed, his shield on his back, his expression a mask of stern disapproval. "Looks like an off-worlder, or some new inhuman who can't control their powers. We should move in hard and fast, contain him before he levels a city block. Or," Teddy Altman, Hulkling, interjected, his voice gentle but firm as he peered over the edge, "we could try not punching the scared, injured person who just crash-landed in a foreign world and immediately saved a family from getting mugged." He gestured down to the alley. "He didn't hurt those guys, Eli. He disarmed one and scared the other off. That's restraint. That's not a monster, that's a calculated move," Eli retorted. "Show restraint in public to make us lower our guard. It's classic strategy," America Chavez scoffed, leaning against an air conditioning unit, looking bored but with an undercurrent of genuine alarm. "You're all wrong." "Well, Billy's close. He's not off-world. He's off-reality." All eyes turned to her. "I can see it," she said, gesturing vaguely at the boy below. "It's faint, but around him, the edges of our world are fuzzy. Warped. Like looking at a reflection in water. He punched through from somewhere else, and he didn't do it cleanly. He dragged a piece of the whole with him. She pushed herself off the unit. That makes him more dangerous than any Hydra experiment, Eli. He could unravel everything just by standing there. Kate processed this, her mind racing. Alien. Magic. Interdimensional anomaly. It was a Tuesday. Okay, new plan, she said, her focus sharpening. Teddy, you and Eli are on civilian control. Get those people back. Establish a perimeter. Non-lethal force only. America, you're our get-out-of-jail-free card. If he goes nuclear, you get everyone you can out of the blast radius. Billy, I want you ready with a containment spell. Something strong, but not aggressive. A cage, not a weapon. I'll make first contact. You sure that's wise, Kate? Teddy asked, a worried crease in his brow. He looks like he's about to fall over, which makes him unpredictable. Kate finished. Better to approach him now while he's off balance. Let's go. Try to look friendly, people, Patriot snorted. Friendly isn't in my job description. With practiced efficiency, the team moved. Teddy, shifting his form to be slightly more imposing but keeping his expression gentle, and Eli, all stern authority, dropped to street level to manage the crowd. America gave Kate a nod, her fists faintly glowing. Billy began to murmur incantations under his breath, blue energy coalescing around his fingertips. Kate took a deep breath, leaped from the rooftop, and fired a grappling hook arrow into the side of the opposite building. She swung down, a silent, purple-clad acrobat, landing in a perfect three-point crouch at the mouth of the alley, right in Deku's line of sight. Deku saw her land. The movement was silent, precise, and utterly confident. A hero. Her costume was practical, purple and black, with a quiver of arrows on her back and a bow held loosely in one hand. She was followed by others. A tall, broad-shouldered young man with blonde hair who seemed to exude a gentle strength. A man in red, white, and blue, his face partially obscured by a mask, carrying a shield that felt familiar, in a way. He radiated discipline and suspicion, and floating just behind them, a young man whose hands shimmered with impossible blue light, his eyes fixed on Deku with an unnerving intensity. Hope warred with a new, potent kind of fear in Deku's chest. These were heroes. But they weren't his heroes. Their stances were wary, tactical. They were approaching him not as a colleague, but as a threat. The woman in purple, clearly the leader, stood up straight. She knocked an arrow to her bow, the movement so fluid it was almost unconscious. The arrowhead wasn't a normal point. It was a bulky, cylindrical device that hummed with a low energy. Deku's own stance shifted instinctively. He put himself slightly in front of the family he just saved, a subconscious act of shielding them. His mind raced, cataloging the new arrivals. For primary opponents. Leader is an archer, likely a long-range specialist with trick arrows. Large blonde male appears to be the team's tank/bruiser. Shield bearer is a close-quarters combatant, likely highly trained. Floating male is a high-level energy manipulator, possibly a mage. A balanced and dangerous team. The archer took a step forward, her expression unreadable. She spoke, and the English words were sharp, clear, and carried an unmistakable tone of command. All right, Sparky, she said, her eyes locked on his. Not another move, Sparky. The nickname, though dismissive, was accurate. The green lightning was still faintly dancing over his arms. Who are you? She continued, her voice dropping, becoming more serious, more dangerous. And what are you? The questions hung in the air, heavy and unanswerable. Who was he? He was Deku, the hero who saves people. But that name meant nothing here. He was Izuku Midoriya, a student from UA High School, a place that likely didn't exist in this world. What was he? He was the 9th inheritor of One for All. A sacred torch, a legacy of power. But how could he even begin to explain that? He opened his mouth to try, to say something, anything. To tell them he wasn't a threat. But all that came out was a choked Japanese phrase. I'm a hero. The archer's eyes narrowed. She didn't understand. Of course she didn't. The language barrier was just one more wall in the prison that had become his reality. And in that moment, the dam broke. The adrenaline that had sustained him since he'd woken up in the vortex finally washed away, leaving behind an ocean of pure, undiluted exhaustion. The pain from 100 different wounds from the war, held at bay by sheer willpower, crashed down on him all at once. The mental exhaustion from the dimensional transit, the sensory overload of this new world, the crushing, soul-deep despair of his isolation, it all hit him like a physical blow. One for all, which had been burning on overdrive to keep him functional, sputtered. The green lightning fizzled out, the last sparks dancing on his knuckles before vanishing. The strength fled his limbs. His vision tunneled, the bright lights of the city folding in on themselves into a pinpoint of darkness. The faces of the heroes before him blurred into indistinct shapes. He heard the archer shout something, a note of alarm in her voice. He felt his knees buckle. The last thing he saw before the world went black was the shocked face of the hero in purple, her bow lowering slightly as she realized he wasn't attacking. He wasn't resisting. He was just a boy. A boy who had fallen from the sky and had nothing left to hold him up. Izuku Midoriya collapsed onto the cracked, unfamiliar pavement of a world that was not his own. The first thing that registered was silence. Not the absence of noise, but a gentle, rhythmic calm that was the antithesis of the chaotic vortex and the cacophony of Times Square. A soft, steady beep, a quiet hum of machinery, the whisper of filtered air. It was a sterile, peaceful void. Izuku Midoriya's eyes fluttered open. The ceiling above him was a clean, matte white, inset with panels that glowed with a soft, sun-like light. He was lying on something impossibly comfortable, a surface that seemed to contour perfectly to his aching body. The grinding pain was gone, replaced by a dull, comprehensive soreness. The kind that came after a battle was truly over. Panic, cold and sharp, tried to seize him. He sat up with a jolt, ignoring the protest of his muscles. Where am I? He wasn't in a hospital. Not any he recognized. The room was a marvel of advanced technology. A transparent screen flickered to life beside the bed, displaying his own heart rate, blood pressure, and a dozen other metrics in a script he couldn't read. An articulated robotic arm was retracted into the wall, tipped with a micro-laser scalpel and a biofoam dispenser. His tattered hero costume was gone. He was dressed in a simple, soft gray shirt and loose black pants that felt cool against his skin. He frantically checked himself for injuries. The deep gash on his forearm from fighting Dobby was gone, replaced by a thin, silvery scar that looked weeks old, not hours. The bruises were faded, the burns soothed. Whoever had brought him here had access to medical technology that made Recovery Girl's quirk look like conventional first aid. They had healed him. But were they friends? The door to the med bay slid open with a near-silent hiss, and the 5 individuals from the alley entered. They moved with a practiced caution, their postures a mixture of authority and wariness. The archer, Kate, was in the lead, her expression a careful mask of neutrality. Behind her, the man with the shield, Eli, looked as if he was personally ready to wrestle a bear, his arms crossed, his jaw set. The kind-faced blonde, Teddy, offered a small, hesitant smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. The woman who felt like a hole in the universe, America, leaned against the doorframe, observing him with an unnerving, analytical gaze. And the young man with the gentle eyes, Billy, hovered near the back, his hands clasped, a palpable aura of curiosity and power emanating from him. Kate took the lead, stopping a respectful 10 feet from his bed. You're awake. Good. Saves us the trouble of a medical scan that probably would have given us nonsense readings anyway. Izuku stared at her, his mind racing to catch up. He understood her tone, the cadence of her speech, but the words themselves were a stream of meaningless sounds. English. He'd studied it in school, but this was fluent, rapid, and complex. It was like trying to catch water in a sieve. I don't. He began in Japanese, his voice raspy. He pointed to his ears and shook his head, trying to convey his confusion. Wakarimasen. I don't understand. Eli Bradley let out a low, frustrated sigh. Great. He doesn't speak English. This just gets better and better. Give him a break, Eli, Teddy murmured, stepping forward slightly. He fell out of the sky. He's probably got a concussion the size of Texas. Teddy looked at Izuku and tried a different approach, speaking slowly and using simple gestures. We are friends. You are safe. Izuku appreciated the effort, but it was still mostly gibberish. He could only grasp at the intent. He saw no immediate hostility, but the tension in the room was as thick as the smoke from one of N's screens. He was a prisoner, albeit a comfortable and well cared for one. This is getting us nowhere, Kate said, pinching the bridge of her nose. Billy, can you do anything? Billy Kaplan stepped forward, his expression thoughtful. I think so. It's a complex piece of neurological magic, but I can create a temporary translation matrix. It's less about changing what he hears and more about remapping the language centers of his brain to interpret the intent directly. He looked at Izuku, his eyes glowing with that soft blue light. May I? It will feel a little strange. Though Izuku didn't understand the words, he understood the gesture of asking for permission. He saw the glowing hands, sensed the power, and knew this was a critical moment. He had no reason to trust them, but he also had no other options. He was alone, powerless in his ability to communicate. He gave a short, hesitant nod. Billy smiled, a genuine, warm smile that seemed to momentarily cut through the tension. He raised his hands, fingers splayed. Okay. Just relax. Phoneta e ment conjuncta, sermo unis fiat. The air shimmered. A web of cerulean light, intricate as a snowflake and complex as a circuit board, spun itself into existence between Billy's hands. He gently pushed it forward. Izuku flinched, but the light didn't impact him. It dissolved, sinking into him like mist. For a second, nothing happened. Then, a strange tingling sensation started behind his eyes, a feeling like his thoughts were being gently sorted and recatalogued. A wave of mild dizziness washed over him. Kate, seeing his disorientation, waited a moment before speaking again, her voice clear and measured. Can you understand me now? The words hit Izuku's ears as the same foreign sounds, but this time, something new happened. In his mind, the meaning blossomed instantly, perfectly clear, as if she had spoken flawless Japanese. It was a bizarre, disorienting experience. He stared at her, his eyes wide with shock. He opened his mouth, intending to reply in his native tongue, but the magic intervened. The thought, "Yes, I can understand you," formed in his mind, and the words that came out of his mouth were English, albeit with a slight, hesitant accent. "Yes," he said, his own voice sounding strange to him. "Yes, I can understand you." What did you do?" Billy beamed. "It worked. It's a basic universal translation spell. Should last for a few hours. After that, we might have to get you some language software." Izuku looked from Billy's glowing hands to Kate's stunned face. Magic? In his world, magic was just a word for quirks that defied easy scientific explanation. But this felt different. It felt ancient, structured, like a fundamental law of this universe he had just stumbled into. "Okay," Kate said, recovering quickly and reasserting control. She gestured to a chair and pulled it over, sitting down and leaning forward, her posture all business. The rest of the team remained standing, a silent jury. "Let's start over. My name is Kate Bishop. We're the Young Avengers." "And you are?" "I am Deku," he said automatically, the hero name coming first. He paused, realizing how that must sound. "My name is Izuku Midoriya. Deku is my hero name." "A hero name," Eli repeated, the skepticism dripping from his voice. "Right. And where are you from, Izuku Midoriya?" "Asgard? Nowhere? One of Dr. Doom's backwater kingdoms?" Izuku shook his head, the names meaning nothing to him. "I'm from Japan. Mizurufu, specifically." He saw the blank looks on their faces. They recognized the country, but not the city. "But, I don't think I'm in my world anymore." That statement hung in the air, charged with significance. America Chavez finally spoke, her voice dry. "Told you. He's from off-map." Kate shot her a look before turning back to Izuku. "Explain. What do you mean, your world?" This was it. The moment where they would decide if he was a lunatic, or something else, entirely. He took a deep breath, trying to organize his thoughts, to explain a reality that was as natural as breathing to him in terms that made sense here. In my world, he began slowly, about 200 years ago, people started being born with special abilities. We call them quirks. It started with one glowing baby and spread. Now, around 80% of the world's population has some kind of quirk, from something minor, like being able to attract small objects, to something incredibly powerful. He watched their faces for their reactions. Kate's eyebrows shot up. Teddy looked fascinated. Eli's expression soured further, his arms crossing even tighter. 80%? Kate echoed, her strategist's mind clearly reeling from the implications. An entire society of superpowered individuals? The laws, the infrastructure, the potential for chaos. That's why the hero system was established, Izuku continued, feeling a surge of passion as he spoke about his home. Being a hero is a government-sanctioned profession. We're trained, licensed, and regulated to use our quirks to combat villains and protect the public. I was a student at UA High, the top hero academy in Japan. So you're saying, Eli interjected, stepping forward, that you come from a planet where being Captain America is as common as being a firefighter? Izuku flinched at the comparison, the name Captain America vaguely familiar from the little boy's toy. I suppose so. It's not that simple, but yes. It's a part of our society. And your quirk? Kate asked, her eyes sharp, analytical. The green lightning, the immense strength, the flying, for lack of a better word. What is it? It's called One for All, Izuku said, the name feeling sacred on his tongue. He couldn't tell them the whole truth, the secret of its passing from user to user. That was a burden for him alone. It's a power stockpiling quirk. It's been passed down through generations, growing stronger with each user. On the 9th, Billy Kaplan, who had been quiet, suddenly took a step forward, his eyes wide, the blue glow returning faintly. That's what I was sensing, he breathed, his voice filled with awe. It's not just power, it's people. It's a lineage. I can feel them. Faintly. 8 other presences, their wills, their experiences, all layered inside your spirit. It's like living magic. A sentient legacy. Izuku stared at Billy, stunned into silence. No one had ever been able to perceive the vestiges before. Not even All Might. For this stranger to look at him and see the very soul of his power was deeply unsettling and, strangely, validating. He wasn't just carrying a quirk, he was carrying them. And Billy could see it. He's not an inhuman, Eli grumbled, though his certainty was clearly shaken. Their powers manifest from terrigenesis, they don't get passed down like a family heirloom. A mutant maybe? A unique X gene? No, America said definitively, pushing off the wall. I've punched my way through dozens of realities. Mutant signatures feel different. Cosmic entities, magical beings, super soldiers, they all have their own frequency. He's a null point. He's not supposed to be here. The laws of physics in his universe must be fundamentally different. The fact that 80% of his population can break the laws of conservation of energy on a whim proves it. She looked directly at Izuku. He's telling the truth. I don't know how, but he is. America's confirmation shifted the entire dynamic of the room. Eli's suspicion didn't vanish, but it was now colored with a grudging acceptance. Kate's expression softened from interrogation to problem-solving. They weren't dealing with a liar or an enemy. They were dealing with a refugee. Just then, a klaxon blared through the room, a loud, urgent alarm that made Izuku jump. A red light began flashing on a wall panel. Oh, you have got to be kidding me, Kate groaned, all business once more. What is it, Friday? A calm, synthesized female voice with a British accent filled the room. Reports of a public disturbance on 42nd and 8th. The individual has been identified as Herman Schultz, codenamed Shocker. On a large screen on the wall, a live news feed appeared. It showed a man in a yellow, quilted costume with large metal gauntlets on his hands. He was blasting concentric rings of vibrational energy at an armored bank truck, the doors of which were buckling under the assault. Shocker? Seriously? Kate said, rolling her eyes. Doesn't he know it's a weekday? Some of us have lives. She stood up, her focus absolute. All right, team, you know the drill. Full containment pattern. Let's make this quick. I want to be back in time for pizza. The team moved with practiced, if slightly unenthusiastic, efficiency. Eli grabbed his shield from a wall mount. Teddy's shoulders broadened, a flicker of green-skinned power running across his arms. What about him? Eli asked, jerking a thumb towards Izuku. He stays, Kate said without hesitation. Right here. We don't know what he can do, we don't know how his powers will react to this environment, and I'm not bringing a reality-warping question mark into a public fight. Teddy, you stay with him. Keep him calm. No, Izuku said, surprising himself with the force in his own voice. He swung his legs off the bed and stood up. He was a little wobbly, but his resolve was firm. I can help. That man is a villain. People could get hurt. It's my job. Your job is in another dimension. Eli cut him off coldly. Here, you're our problem. Stay put. Kate held up a hand. Her gaze on Izuku wasn't unkind, but it was absolute. He's right. I appreciate the offer, Midoriya, but you're a variable I can't account for. You're injured, you're in an unfamiliar place, and frankly, you're a potential danger to everyone, including yourself. Stay. That's an order. Before Izuku could protest further, America Chavez punched the air twice, creating a shimmering, star-shaped portal. The team filed through, disappearing in an instant. The portal snapped shut, leaving Izuku alone in the medbay with Teddy, the sounds of the distant battle now filtering in from the news feed on the screen. Teddy offered him an apologetic smile. Don't take it personally. They're just cautious. Kate's motto is plan for everything, punch what's left. You're not in her plan yet. Izuku sighed, running a hand through his messy green hair. He understood their caution. He truly did. If a stranger with immense power had crash-landed during one of his missions, he would have been just as wary. But it didn't stop the feeling of helpless frustration that was churning in his gut. A hero who can't help is no hero at all. He turned his attention to the screen, his analytical mind kicking in immediately. He couldn't fight, but he could watch. He could learn. The young Avengers engaged Shocker, and it was messy. Kate was firing arrows from a rooftop, trying to herd civilians away from the fight. Patriot was charging in head-on, his shield absorbing the vibrational blasts. But he was being pushed back, unable to close the distance. Hulkling, Teddy's hero form, a large, green-skinned powerhouse with wings, was trying to flank him, but Shocker kept blasting the ground near him, using the shockwaves to keep him off balance. Wiccan was floating above the fray, chanting, weaving a complex containment spell, but the raw, chaotic energy of Shocker's blasts was disrupting his magic. They were powerful. Incredibly so. But they weren't a team. They were 4 individuals fighting the same opponent. There was no synergy, no coordination, and Izuku started muttering. It began as a low whisper, a habit so ingrained he didn't even notice it. No, that's not right. Patriot's frontal assault is playing directly into Shocker's strengths. The gauntlets are designed to repel direct attacks. Hawkeye has a good vantage point, but her arrows are non-lethal suppressants. She needs to be disabling, not distracting. Hulkling has the raw strength to overpower him, but his approach is too predictable. And Wiccan, he's the key. He's their artillery, but they've left him completely exposed. If Shocker targets him, they lose their biggest gun. Teddy looked over at him, bewildered. What was that? Izuku didn't hear him. His focus was entirely on the battle, his mind a supercomputer running 1,000 combat simulations at once. The muttering grew louder, more frantic, as he saw Shocker blast the car, sending it spinning towards a group of civilians Kate hadn't been able to clear yet. That's a mistake. Izuku gasped, his hands clenching into fists. He's creating chaos to cover his escape. They're reacting, not controlling the fight. They need to work together. He saw Wiccan throw up a shield to protect the civilians, but the effort broke his concentration on the containment spell. Shocker used the opening to unleash a massive blast, cracking the pavement and forcing the entire team back. He's going to bring that building down, Izuku yelled, pointing at the screen. Shocker was aiming his gauntlets at the support columns of a nearby office building. It was a classic villainous distraction. He couldn't just stand here. He couldn't just watch them fail. His eyes scanned the room and landed on a communications panel near his bed, a small headset icon glowing on it. It was a long shot, but he lunged for the panel, slapping the main broadcast button. "Listen to me," he shouted, his voice cracking with urgency. In Kate Bishop's ear, a frantic, accented voice suddenly cut through the comms channel. "Listen to me, what the hell?" She grunted, dodging a vibrational blast that turned the spot she'd been standing on into dust. "Who is this?" "Teddy, I told you to keep him. There's no time." Izuku's voice pleaded, rapid fire and packed with an unbelievable amount of information. "You're fighting his fight. You need to stop reacting and start dictating the pace. Kate, Hawkeye, his gauntlets run on a contained power source. It's Stark tech, but it's a closed system. You need to disrupt it. Don't aim for him, aim for the reflection off the bus behind him to his left. Ricochet an EMP arrow off it. The angle will bypass his direct shielding." Kate blinked. The sheer tactical audacity of the suggestion was insane. It was a 1 in a million shot. But the logic was flawless. "Eli, Patriot," the voice commanded, leaving no room for argument. "The EMP will disorient him for exactly 1.2 seconds. That's your window. Don't attack, you can't break the gauntlets with force. Use your shield to pin his right arm against the wall. Leverage, not strength." Eli, gritting his teeth as he absorbed another blast, heard the instructions. It was galling, taking orders from the anomaly in the medbay, but damn it if it didn't make sense. "Teddy, Hulkling! Billy, Wiccan!" Izuku's voice was reaching a fever pitch. "While his right arm is pinned, you have a clear shot at his left. Combine your attacks. Teddy, you create the blunt force trauma. Billy, don't use a complex spell, it's too slow. Use a raw kinetic force blast. The combined impact of physical and magical energy on the same spot should be enough to shatter the gauntlet's casing. Do it now!" There was a split second of hesitation across the battlefield. 4 heroes, momentarily stunned by the clarity and precision of the unsolicited plan. It was Kate who made the call. She trusted the strategy, if not the source. "You heard him," she yelled into the comms. "Do it! Now!" It was like watching a switch being flipped. Kate drew, aimed, and fired in a single, fluid motion. The EMP arrow flew, not at Shocker, but at the chrome bumper of a city bus. It struck the metal at a perfect angle, and the arrowhead discharged its payload in a flash of blue energy that ricocheted directly into Shocker's back, where his power pack was located. His gauntlets sputtered, fizzling with sparks. Shocker staggered, shaking his head, momentarily stunned. "What the?" He never finished the thought. Eli was already moving, a blur of red, white, and blue. He didn't charge. He flowed, using Shocker's disorientation to get in close, and slammed his vibranium shield not against Shocker's chest, but against his right gauntlet, pinning it with crushing force against the brick wall of the bank. Shocker roared in frustration, trying to bring his left arm around. But he was too late. From the sky, Hulkling descended like a green comet, his fists clenched. Simultaneously, Wiccan, no longer weaving an intricate spell but gathering raw, blue power, unleashed a focused beam of pure kinetic magic. The two attacks, physical and mystical, struck the left gauntlet at the exact same instant. The result was spectacular. There was a deafening crack, and the metal casing of the gauntlet shattered, exploding outwards in a shower of harmless fragments. Shocker cried out as his arm was violently thrown back, his primary weapon gone. The fight was over. The whole sequence had taken less than 5 seconds. The police swarmed in as the young Avengers stood in the stunned silence, breathing heavily. They looked at each other, a new, unspoken understanding passing between them. They hadn't just won. They had worked together with a seamless, brutal efficiency they hadn't achieved in months. Kate lowered her bow, a slow, incredulous smile touching her lips. "Well, I'll be damned." When the star-shaped portal opened back in the medbay, the team stepped through into a tense silence. Izuku was standing by the comm panel, looking mortified, like a child who had just been caught drawing on the walls. "I'm sorry," he said immediately, bowing his head slightly. "I overstepped. I shouldn't have interfered. It was unprofessional and He was cut off by Eli Bradley, who walked over and stood directly in front of him. Izuku braced himself for a reprimand. Instead, the stoic hero simply stared at him for a long moment, his expression unreadable behind his mask. "That was," Eli said, his voice a low rumble, "the single most effective piece of battlefield analysis I have ever heard." "Where did you learn to do that?" Izuku looked up, surprised. I've always done it. I analyze heroes, villains, quirks. It's my hobby. I have notebooks full of it." America Chavez let out a short, sharp laugh. "Your hobby? Kid, generals at the Pentagon get paid millions for that kind of strategic insight." Kate walked over, pulling off her tactical sunglasses. The annoyance was gone, replaced by a look of sheer, unadulterated curiosity. It was the look of a detective who had just been handed the most fascinating clue of her career. She wasn't angry. She wasn't even annoyed. She was intrigued. "You just turned a 10-minute brawl into a 5-second takedown," she said, her voice even. From a mile away, watching a grainy news feed, she crossed her arms, mirroring his earlier posture, but the intent was entirely different. It wasn't a barrier. It was a pose of contemplation. "Izuku Midoriya, I think you and I have a lot more to talk about." Izuku looked at the faces of the team around him. The suspicion was still there in Eli's eyes, but it was now tempered with a grudging respect. The kindness in Teddy's face was now mixed with awe. Billy was looking at him as if he were the most fascinating puzzle he'd ever encountered, and Kate Bishop, the leader, was looking at him not as a problem to be solved, or a threat to be contained, but as something else entirely. An asset. The anomaly in the medbay was no longer just a prisoner. He was a piece that had just been placed on the board, and in doing so, had changed the entire game. Izuku awoke the next morning to the smell of frying bacon and a profound sense of dislocation. For a fleeting, blissful second, he thought he was back in the UA dorms, that Satu was making breakfast, and the chaos of the previous day had been nothing more than a stress-induced nightmare. Then he opened his eyes. The pristine white ceiling, the soft glow of the light panels, and the faint hum of advanced technology brought reality crashing back down. He wasn't home. He might never be home again. He sat up, his body feeling surprisingly whole. The advanced medical technology of this world had worked wonders, leaving him with only a lingering muscle fatigue. The gray shirt and pants he'd been given were folded neatly on a chair, along with a new pair of surprisingly comfortable red sneakers that looked suspiciously like a 3D printed version of his own iconic footwear. A small, almost touching gesture of familiarity in an overwhelmingly alien world. The door hissed open, and Teddy Altman walked in, holding a plate piled high with what looked like scrambled eggs, bacon, and toast. He was out of costume, dressed in a simple t-shirt and jeans, and his smile was warm and genuine. "Morning," he said, his voice as gentle as his expression. "Figured you'd be hungry." Billy's translation spell is a bit of a mental drain, so it's best to have some food before he recasts it. "Hope you like eggs." Izuku found himself returning the smile, a small, fragile thing. "Thank you." The English words still felt foreign in his mouth, a suit of clothes that didn't quite fit. As he ate, a comfortable silence settled between them. Izuku devoured the food with an almost desperate hunger, realizing he hadn't had a proper meal since, he couldn't even remember, since before the final battle had begun. Teddy just sat in the chair, scrolling through something on a paper-thin transparent device that he called a Stark Pad. When Izuku was finished, Billy appeared in the doorway, giving a small wave. "Ready for round 2? He spoke a few soft words, and the strange, tingling sensation of the translation spell washed over Izuku once more. "All right." Kate's voice came over an intercom, crisp and clear. "Midoriya, once you're dressed, Teddy's going to give you the grand tour. We've established you're not an immediate threat, but you're still an unknown. Consider this orientation. And try not to break anything." The tour of the Young Avengers base, a section of the legendary Avengers mansion that had been rebuilt and modernized, was a lesson in culture shock. It was less a tour of a building and more a tour of a different philosophy of heroism. The walls were adorned with holographic displays showing news feeds from around the world. Izuku watched, his eyes scanning for what he expected to see: hero news channels, rankings, merchandise commercials, public quirk usage reports. There were none. The news was dominated by politics, economics, and celebrity gossip. Superhuman activity was reported, yes, but it was treated as a rare and often terrifying anomaly. He saw a clip of a man in a red and gold suit of armor, Iron Man, Teddy supplied, and he was treated not as a professional hero, but as a billionaire celebrity who happened to fight aliens in his spare time. He saw footage of a giant green monster, the Hulk, and the commentary was one of fear and destruction, not of a hero with a difficult quirk. Where are all the heroes? Izuku asked, his voice barely a whisper as they stood in a vast, sunlit atrium overlooking a manicured lawn. Teddy's brow furrowed in confusion. What do you mean? They're all over. The Avengers, the Fantastic Four, the X-Men, there are hundreds, maybe thousands of us. No, I mean the profession, Izuku clarified, struggling to find the right words. The agencies, the sidekicks, the licensing exams, the billboards for support gear, the morning talk shows debating the top 10 heroes of the week. In my world, heroism is the backbone of society. It's everywhere. It's normal. Teddy's expression softened with a dawning, profound understanding. Izuku, here, it's not. Most people, the vast majority of people, don't have powers. They're just people. Being a hero isn't a job you apply for. It's something that happens to you. You get bitten by a radioactive spider, you're born a mutant, you build a suit of armor. Or you're the half-Kree, half-Skrull hybrid son of a legendary soldier and a princess, destined to unite two warring empires. He gave a self-deprecating shrug. It's a calling, I guess. Or a curse. For most of us, it's both. The words hit Izuku with the force of a physical blow. A world without quirks. A world where 80% of the population was like he used to be, powerless. The very foundation of his reality, the central conflict that had defined his entire life, being born quirkless in a world of quirks, was inverted here. Here, he wasn't the exception. He was the impossible rule. The feeling was one of profound, crushing isolation. He had defined himself by his struggle, by his dream to become a hero in a world of heroes. Here, that context was gone. He was a solution to a problem that didn't exist in the same way. He felt his purpose, the very core of his identity, begin to fray at the edges. He was a finely crafted key for a lock that was a million light years away. So, I'm a freak here, he stated, the words flat and hollow. No, Teddy said, his voice firm, placing a reassuring hand on Izuku's shoulder. You're not a freak. You're just a long way from home. He steered Izuku towards a glass door that led out onto a rooftop garden. Come on. I think we need to talk. The garden was an oasis of green in a city of gray. Planter boxes overflowed with flowers and vegetables, and a gentle breeze rustled the leaves of a small Japanese maple tree in the center. They sat on a simple stone bench, the roar of New York City a distant, muted hum below them. For a long time, neither of them spoke. Izuku just stared at his hands, the hands that could shatter buildings, the hands that carried the legacy of 8 other souls. In his world, they were a miracle. Here, they were an anomaly, a statistical impossibility. It's a lot to take in, Teddy said finally, his voice gentle. Realizing that everything you thought was universal is local. Izuku nodded, not trusting himself to speak. I think I get it, Teddy continued, looking out at the skyline. More than the others, maybe. I know what it feels like to have a legacy you didn't ask for, to feel like you're from another world, because I am. He looked at Izuku, his eyes holding a depth of sincerity that was startling. My mother was Kree. A soldier. My father was Skrull. A prince. They were supposed to be mortal enemies. My whole life, I've had these 2 warring heritages inside me. I'm the king of space, the ruler of the Kree-Skrull alliance. He let out a soft, tired laugh. Most days, though, I'm just Teddy, and I'd rather be here, growing tomatoes with my husband, than sitting on some cosmic throne. Izuku looked up, his interest piqued despite his despair. Your husband, you mean Billy? Wiccan? Teddy's face lit up with a brilliant smile. Yeah. He's the other side of my coin. He found out a while ago that he's not just a mutant with magic powers. He's the demiurge, a being with the potential to rewrite reality on a cosmic scale. So you've got the king of space and a literal god in the making, trying to figure out whose turn it is to do the dishes. He leaned back on the bench, his point becoming clear. What I'm saying is, we all have ghosts, Izuku. Legacies that feel too heavy to carry. When Billy looked at you, he said he saw 8 other people inside your power. That sounds heavy. The dam of Izuku's composure, already cracked, finally broke. The empathy in Teddy's voice was too much to bear. A single tear traced a path down his cheek, then another. It is, he whispered, his voice thick with unshed grief. It's the greatest honor of my life. But it's so heavy. He looked at his hands again. This power. One for all, it was meant to defeat a great evil in my world. A man named All for One. He could steal and give quirks. He ruled the underworld for a century. We just finished the final war against him and his successor. We won. I think, his voice faltered. But the cost, so many people. I see their faces when I close my eyes. People I couldn't save. A teacher, a friend. He choked on the name. Sir Night Eye. He was my mentor's former sidekick. He could see the future. He saw a future where I died, where we lost. We fought against it, we tried to change it, but he still died. He died saving someone I should have been fast enough to save. He was openly crying now, the raw, unprocessed trauma of the war bubbling to the surface. I have this power, this incredible legacy, and my purpose is to save everyone. But I can't. I failed. And my last act, my final gambit against the villain, it didn't just defeat him. It threw me here. It tore me away from everyone I was trying to protect. What kind of victory is that? What kind of hero fails so completely that he saves his world only to lose it entirely? Teddy didn't offer empty platitudes. He didn't say it's not your fault or you did your best. He simply sat with him, a silent, comforting presence, and let him grieve. He put his arm around Izuku's shaking shoulders, and for the first time since he had been ripped from his reality, Izuku Midoriya didn't feel completely alone. While Izuku was unburdening his soul, 2 floors below, in a shielded laboratory that hummed with arcane and technological energy, America Chavez and Billy Kaplan were investigating the source of the problem. On a containment pedestal in the center of the room lay a single, scorched piece of metal, a fragment of Izuku's own support gear gauntlet, which had been torn off during his dimensional transit. It was mundane in its construction, steel and carbon fiber, but it was radiating an energy that made Billy's teeth itch. It's not fading, America said, her arms crossed as she stared at the fragment. She could see what Billy could only sense. A faint, angry shimmer around the metal, a place where the air seemed thin and distorted. Whatever hole he came through, he didn't close the door behind him. This thing is like an anchor. It's still connected. Billy's hands glowed with blue light as he performed a complex diagnostic spell. Ethereal runes and glowing lines of code swirled around the fragment. She's right. The energy signature it's a wound, a scar on the skin of our reality. It's leaking a low-level chronoradiation, but it's the nature of the energy that's bizarre. It's chaotic, but it has a will behind it. 9 wills, to be precise. 1 for all, America stated. So his power is what's keeping the tear open. It's more complicated than that, Billy murmured, his brow furrowed in concentration. His power is the tear, in a way. It's a paradox, a power that exists outside the normal flow of cause and effect in our universe, passed down like a story. It's an ontological anomaly. And our reality is trying to reject it, like a body trying to fight off an infection. He shivered. And something else is listening. America's head snapped up. What do you mean, listening, through the tear? Billy said, his voice dropping to a whisper. The energy signature isn't just radiating outwards. It's a beacon. I can feel a presence on the other side. Watching. It's ancient, cold, and unbelievably intelligent. It's looking at Izuku like a scientist looks at a microbe under a microscope. An impurity that needs to be sterilized. The air in the lab grew cold, the humming of the equipment suddenly sounding sinister. Billy's description painted a terrifying picture, not of a monster, but of a cold, cosmic intelligence. A force of order that saw Izuku as a disruptive element of chaos. Far beyond the constraints of normal space and time, in a citadel built upon the shattered remnants of 1,000 conquered futures, a figure sat upon a throne. He was not a king, not an emperor, not in the way lesser beings understood the terms. He was a force of history, a master of the timeline. His face was obscured by a high-tech helmet, and his futuristic armor hummed with temporal energy. Before him, a vast chronosphere displayed the flowing, sacred timeline, a golden river of causality that he had meticulously cultivated and defended. But today, there was a flaw. A jagged, ugly crack from which a foul, paradoxical energy was seeping. An energy signature that defied all known physics and chronomechanics. An anomaly. The figure mused, his voice a synthesized, emotionless baritone that echoed in the vast chamber. Not a branch. Not a nexus event. An ontological intrusion, a variable from a timeline so divergent it should not be able to exist in parallel. He zoomed in on the source of the intrusion. A holographic image of Izuku Midoriya appeared in the chronosphere, sitting on a rooftop garden, his face streaked with tears. The figure analyzed the boy, his systems processing trillions of data points in a nanosecond. He saw the lineage of power within him, the impossible energy that grew with each generation. He saw the nature of one for all, a living, self-perpetuating paradox. It is a sentient timeline. The conqueror realized, a flicker of something almost like interest in his voice. A pocket chronology that exists within a single biological entity. Its very presence here creates a friction that will inevitably erode the integrity of my timeline. It is an infection. He had seen and pruned countless threats. Rebellious variants of himself, rogue cosmic entities, timelines that dared to deviate from his ordained path. They were all loud, chaotic, and ultimately, predictable. This boy was different. He was quiet. He was accidental. And that made him infinitely more dangerous. He was a loose thread that, if pulled, could unravel the entire tapestry. An ontological paradox cannot be allowed to persist, he declared to the empty throne room. It must be excised. Pruned from the timeline before it can fester. He tapped a command into his throne's console. An alert was logged. A mission protocol initiated. Target designation, Chronal Impurity 9-0-4-1. Code name, Deku. Directive, sterilize. Assigned agent, Kong the Conqueror. Back in the lab, Izuku and Teddy had rejoined the others. Kate and Eli were there now, having been briefed on Billy and America's findings. The mood was somber. So he's a walking, talking tear in reality, Eli said, summing it up with his usual bluntness. And his power is attracting something. We need to find a way to stabilize it, Kate said, her mind already working on the problem. To heal the wound. Maybe we can use the fragment to create a metaphysical bandage? Something to seal the connection? It's worth a try, Billy agreed. But the energies are incredibly volatile. We need a power source to act as a catalyst. And the only source of that specific energy is Izuku. All eyes turned to him. The weight on his shoulders seemed to double. He wasn't just a lost hero anymore. He was a danger to this new world that had, however reluctantly, taken him in. I'll do it, he said, his voice firm, his earlier despair now forged into resolve. Whatever it takes. I won't let my presence here hurt anyone else. Billy nodded grimly. Okay. Izuku, I need you to place your hand on the containment field. Don't touch the fragment itself. Just let your energy resonate with it. I'm going to try and map the connection, to see if I can weave a spell to sever it. Izuku stepped up to the pedestal. He could feel the energy coming off the small piece of his gauntlet. It felt like home. A tiny, painful echo of his world. He took a deep breath and placed his palm flat against the shimmering blue containment field. The moment he made contact, everything went wrong. One for all surged within him, drawn to its echo. Green lightning erupted across his arm, not wild and chaotic, but focused, lancing into the containment field. The fragment on the pedestal flared with an intense, emerald light. Billy cried out, his hands flying to his temples. The feedback! It's too much! The energy spike was a psychic explosion. It slammed into both Izuku and Billy, their minds suddenly and violently linked through the open wound in reality. The world of the lab dissolved around them, replaced by a horrifying, shared vision. They were standing in Times Square, but it was a nightmare version. The sky was the color of a dying ember, choked with green and black clouds that swirled like a toxic vortex. The skyscrapers, the pride of the city, were unraveling. Not crumbling or exploding, but fraying at the edges like old cloth. Their structures seemed to dissolve into threads of light and shadow, their history and future becoming visible and then snapping apart. The people on the streets were worse. They weren't dead, they were being erased. Their bodies became translucent, flickering between childhood, adulthood, and old age in the span of a second. Their timelines were coming undone, their entire existence wiped away by the chronal friction. The air was filled with the sound of a billion clocks all breaking at once, a discordant symphony of shattered time. And in the center of it all, the source of the decay, was Izuku. He was floating where he had first landed, his body a raging inferno of uncontrollable green energy. The lightning wasn't arcing from him, it was consuming him, and the city along with it. The vestiges of One for All swirled around him, not as encouraging spirits, but as horrifying, silent specters, their forms distorted and monstrous. He was screaming, but the sound was lost in the groan of reality tearing itself apart. He was the epicenter of the apocalypse, a living singularity whose very presence was unmaking the world. The vision slammed into both of them with the force of a physical blow. Billy was thrown backwards, landing in a heap on the floor, gasping for breath. Izuku stumbled back from the pedestal, his face pale with horror, clutching his head. The lab returned to normal. The fragment on the pedestal dimmed, its angry glow receding to a faint shimmer. But the image was burned into their minds. Kate and Eli rushed to their sides. "What was that? What did you see?" Kate demanded, helping a shaken Billy to his feet. Billy looked at Izuku, his eyes wide with a new, terrible fear. "I saw the future," Billy whispered, his voice trembling. "I saw what happens if we fail. His power, it's going to erase New York City." The vision left a toxic silence in its wake. It clung to the air in the lab, thicker and more suffocating than any smoke screen. The image of a dissolving New York, of timelines unraveling into nothingness, was branded onto the insides of their eyelids. For Izuku, it was a waking nightmare, a horrifying perversion of his own power. He, who had dedicated his entire being to saving people, had just witnessed a future where his very existence was the instrument of their annihilation. He felt a cold, familiar dread coil in his stomach, the same dread he'd felt when Sir Night-Eye had shown him the future, a prophecy of death and failure. Eli Bradley was the first to break the silence. His voice was low, hard, and stripped of all pretense. "So that's it, then. He's a time bomb. A walking, talking, reality-ending bomb, and we're just keeping him in our house." He wasn't looking at Izuku. He was looking at Kate, his gaze an indictment. "We need to get him off planet. Off reality. Give him to SWRD. Let Doctor Strange lock him in a pocket dimension. I don't care. But he cannot stay here. And send him where, Eli?" Teddy shot back, his gentle demeanor replaced by a fierce protectiveness as he stood near Izuku. "He's a kid who's lost everything. We're not just going to throw him in a cage. That's not what the Avengers do. The Avengers protect the Earth." Eli countered, his voice rising. "And right now, he is the single greatest threat to it. Did you not just see what he's capable of? He won't even have to try. He'll just be, and the city will come undone around him." "It was a possible future, not a definite one," Billy interjected, his voice still shaky as he leaned against the console for support. "Visions are fluid. But the potential is there. His power and our reality are fundamentally incompatible. It's like mixing matter and antimatter. Without a containment field, they will annihilate each other. Then we build one," America Chavez said, her tone pragmatic and detached. She was studying Izuku, not with fear, but with the intense focus of someone trying to solve an impossible physics problem. "A big one. Something to insulate him from our space-time. But that's a long-term solution. The immediate problem is the big, scary something that's watching him." That vision wasn't just a natural outcome. It felt instigated. Like we were being shown the worst-case scenario on purpose. Kate Bishop had been silent throughout the exchange, her back to the group as she stared at the innocuous fragment of metal on its pedestal. Her mind was a whirlwind of tactical calculations, risk assessments, and ethical dilemmas. Eli was right. The logical, pragmatic move was to contain Izuku, to remove the variable from the equation entirely. But Teddy was right too. This wasn't a weapon they'd found. It was a person. A heroic person, if his actions in Times Square and his unsolicited strategy session were any indication. A hero with a martyr complex the size of a helicarrier, but a hero nonetheless. She turned around, her face set. The debate was over. "He's not going anywhere," she said, her voice cutting through the tension with absolute authority. "We're not handing him over to anyone. He's our responsibility now. Which means we need to understand him. Not just his power, but him. How he thinks, how he fights, what his limits are." She looked directly at Izuku, who flinched under the intensity of her gaze. He looked small, broken, the vibrant energy that usually crackled around him utterly extinguished. He looked like he was ready to volunteer for his own imprisonment. "Midoriya," Kate said, her tone shifting from commander to something more direct. "That strategic analysis you gave us during the shocker fight. That wasn't a fluke, was it?" Izuku shook his head, looking at the floor. "No. It's what I do." "Good," Kate said with a sharp nod. "Because you're about to do a lot more of it. I'm taking you to the Danger Room." The name itself sent a ripple of apprehension through the team. The Danger Room was a legend, a state-of-the-art combat simulator designed by the X-Men and upgraded by Tony Stark and Reed Richards. It used a combination of hard-light holograms, advanced robotics, and localized reality warping to create training scenarios so realistic they were often more dangerous than actual missions. It was where the young Avengers went to get their teeth kicked in, to be humbled, to be forged. "Kate, are you sure that's a good idea?" Teddy asked, concerned. "Putting him in a high-stress environment right now could cause his power to flare up." "That's the point," Kate said grimly. "I need to see what happens when he's pushed. I need to know what we're dealing with. Is he a soldier, a strategist, or just a nuke waiting for a trigger?" She looked back at Izuku. "The objective isn't to win. It's to show me how you operate. Show me what kind of hero you are." Izuku looked up, a flicker of something, desperation, determination, in his green eyes. A test. He understood tests. Tests had a clear objective, a path to success. For the first time since the vision, he felt a sliver of purpose. He had to prove to them, and to himself, that he was not the monster from that horrible future. He was a hero. "I'll do it," he said, his voice quiet but steady. The Danger Room was a vast, cavernous space. The walls, floor, and ceiling were a grid of shifting black panels, giving the impression of standing inside an infinite, digital void. The air hummed with latent power. "Welcome to the Hurt Locker," Kate said, standing beside Izuku in an elevated, shielded observation booth. The rest of the team was arrayed behind her, their expressions a mixture of curiosity and concern. "Friday, load simulation Omega Sentinel Siege. Difficulty level 7. Acknowledged, Kate," the AI's voice replied, echoing through the chamber. "A word of caution. The subject's energy readings are unlike anything in my database. Predicting his power output is problematic. There is a non-zero chance the simulation's integrity could be compromised." "We'll take that chance, Friday," Kate said, her eyes fixed on Izuku. "Midoriya, the scenario is simple. A squadron of Omega Sentinels is attacking a civilian population center. The objective is to neutralize the threat, while minimizing civilian casualties and property damage. You're going in solo. The simulation is live on your mark." Izuku nodded, his jaw tight. He stepped out of the booth and onto a platform that lowered him to the center of the vast chamber. As he descended, the black grid dissolved, replaced by a stunningly realistic cityscape. He stood in the middle of a bustling downtown square, surrounded by photorealistic hard-light civilians going about their day. The detail was incredible. He could smell the hot dogs from a street vendor's cart, hear the distant traffic, feel the simulated breeze on his face. Then, the sky darkened. 6 colossal robots, each 30 feet tall and bristling with advanced weaponry, descended from the sky on pillars of fire. Their metallic faces were cold and passive, with a single, glowing red eye. The Omega Sentinels. The simulated civilians began to scream and scatter. Izuku didn't hesitate. This was his element. This was a problem with a clear solution. Punch it until it stops. One for all, full cowling 30%. Green lightning exploded around him, a vibrant storm of contained power. He shot off the ground like a cannonball, a green blur of motion. The first sentinel raised its arm, a plasma cannon charging with a high-pitched whine. Izuku was already there. He didn't use a named smash. He simply drove his fist into the robot's head with a concussive force that shattered its optical sensor and sent it staggering back. He was a whirlwind of controlled destruction. He used Black Whip to ensnare the legs of one sentinel, sending it crashing into another. He used Air Force to propel himself through the air, dodging laser fire with impossible agility. He landed on the shoulders of a third sentinel and delivered a pinpoint 45% Detroit smash directly into its primary power core, causing it to explode from the inside out. In the observation booth, the team watched in stunned silence. "My God," Billy breathed. "The power output, it's off the charts. He's like a combination of Captain Marvel and Spider-Man." "His control is incredible," Eli admitted, his arms crossed, but his eyes wide with grudging respect. "He's not just hitting hard. Every blow is precise, aimed at a structural weakness. He's dismantling them." But Kate wasn't watching his power. She was watching his choices. A stray plasma blast from a sentinel went wide, heading for a holographic bus full of screaming civilians. Without a thought, Izuku changed his trajectory, putting his own body directly in the path of the blast. The simulation registered the hit with a brutal, concussive force that sent him tumbling through the air. A large portion of his simulated health bar, visible on the monitor, vanished in a flash of red. He grunted in simulated pain but immediately righted himself and re-engaged. Another sentinel fired a volley of micro-missiles. Izuku could have dodged them. Instead, he used Black Whip to create a dense, layered shield, catching every single missile before they could hit the buildings behind him. The subsequent explosions engulfed him, his health bar plummeting further. "What is he doing?" Teddy asked, his knuckles white as he gripped the railing. "He doesn't have to take those hits. He's faster than their targeting systems." "Yes, he is," Kate said, her voice dangerously quiet. "But he's not trying to dodge. He's trying to shield. He's treating every piece of the simulation, every fake person, every holographic building, as if it's real and irreplaceable. He's positioning himself to absorb every single point of damage." Down on the floor, Izuku was starting to show the strain. His movements were becoming sloppier, his simulated injuries taking their toll. There were only 2 sentinels left, but he was operating at less than a quarter of his starting health. He saw the final 2 sentinels power up their main cannons, aiming in 2 different directions, both at buildings packed with holographic civilians. There was no way to stop them both in time, so he made a choice. One for all. 100%. He roared, the green energy around him flaring to an almost blinding intensity. He gathered all his power not for an attack, but for a defense. He slammed both his fists into the ground, channeling the raw, untamed power of one for all outwards. Detroit. Smash! The resulting shockwave was catastrophic. The entire simulation flickered as the pavement buckled and exploded upwards, creating a massive, instantaneous wall of earth and asphalt that absorbed both plasma blasts. The civilians were saved. The buildings were saved. But the resulting feedback from the simulation, combined with his simulated critical injuries, was too much. The holographic world around Izuku dissolved back into the black grid, and he collapsed to his knees, gasping for breath, the simulation ending in his defeat due to medical incapacitation. The final score flashed on the monitor. Threats neutralized June 6. Civilian casualties 0. Property damage 94%. Subject status critically injured, simulated. "He won," Teddy said, a note of triumph in his voice. "He saved everyone." "No," Kate said, her voice like ice. "He lost." She hit the intercom. "Midoriya. Get back up here. Now." When Izuku returned to the observation booth, he was met with a wall of Kate Bishop's disapproval. She stood before him, her arms crossed, her expression harder than any sentinel. "Explain to me what that was," she said, her voice devoid of any warmth. I stopped the threat, Izuku said, confused. I saved the civilians. You saved the holograms, Kate corrected, her voice sharp. And in doing so, you got yourself killed. What happens next, Midoriya? What happens when the next wave of sentinels arrives in 5 minutes, and the only one who could stop them is lying in a bloody heap on the pavement? You didn't save anyone. You just delayed their deaths. Izuku stared at her, speechless. That wasn't heroism, she continued, stepping closer, her voice dropping to a low, intense growl. That was a suicide run. You have more power than anyone I have ever seen, and you use it like a disposable shield. You treated your own life, your own well-being, as the first and only resource to be spent. That's not leadership. That's not even good soldiering. That's a martyr complex. And martyrs don't win wars. They just make inspiring stories for the people who have to clean up their mess. Every word was a perfectly aimed arrow, piercing through the armor of his heroic ideals and striking the vulnerable, insecure core of his being. He had spent his entire life believing that being a hero meant being willing to sacrifice everything. All Might had done it. Sir Night Eye had done it. It was the price of victory. The goal of a hero isn't to die for the people, Kate said, her gaze unwavering. It's to live for them. To be there tomorrow, and the day after that. You took every single hit you could have easily dodged. You protected fake buildings over your own safety. Your property damage score is astronomical because you created a damn earthquake to stop 2 plasma cannons. There were 1,000 other ways to handle that, but you chose the one that was most destructive to the environment and to yourself. She took a deep breath, the anger receding slightly, replaced by a cold, hard pragmatism. I know what you're trying to do. You're trying to be a symbol. The perfect shield. But a shield that breaks after the first hit is useless. I can't put you in the field. I can't put my team in the field with you. Because your instinct for self-sacrifice will get them all killed. Izuku felt a profound sense of shame wash over him. She was right. He saw the battle through her eyes now, not as a series of heroic sacrifices, but as a string of tactical blunders. He had been so focused on saving everyone in the moment that he had completely disregarded the strategic implications. He wasn't thinking like a leader. He was thinking like a sidekick throwing himself in front of a bullet. He looked down at his trembling hands. What would you have done? He asked, his voice barely a whisper. Kate's expression softened almost imperceptibly. That's the right question. She turned to the control panel. Friday, reset the simulation. Same scenario. But this time, Midoriya, you're not in it. She gestured to the command chair in the center of the booth. You are. Your team is my team. Your objective is the same. Show me how it's done, strategist. Round 2 was an entirely different experience. Izuku sat in the command chair, his heart pounding. The panoramic screen in front of him showed multiple views of the battlefield, tactical readouts, energy signatures, and a direct feed from a simulated drone overhead. Down on the floor, the young Avengers, or at least, their perfectly replicated hard-light avatars, stood ready. Simulation live, Kate said, her voice neutral. The sentinels descended. The civilians screamed. But this time, Izuku didn't move. He watched. He analyzed. The frantic, self-destructive energy was gone, replaced by a cold, humming focus. His muttering started again, but it wasn't panicked. It was controlled, precise. They're deploying in a standard search and destroy pattern, he murmured, his eyes darting between screens. Predictable. They prioritize high-density civilian targets first. We can use that. He leaned forward, his hand hovering over the comms panel. He took a deep breath. Hawkeye, he said, his voice now crisp and clear, devoid of the earlier hesitation. There's a water tower on the roof of the building to your east. I need you to put an explosive arrow into its base. Don't detonate it yet. Just place it. Copy that, the simulated Kate's voice replied. Down below, her avatar fired a single, perfect shot. Wiccan, Izuku continued, his mind already 3 steps ahead. The sentinels are networked. I need you to create a feedback loop. A localized arcane virus. Don't try to shut them down, just disrupt their targeting sensors for 3 seconds. Can you do that? On it, Billy's avatar responded, his hands glowing. Patriot, Hulkling. You two are the hammer. When their sensors go down, they'll default to a defensive perimeter. They'll cluster together in the center of the square. That's your cue. I want a coordinated pincer movement. Patriot, you go low, use your shield to shatter their leg joints. Hulkling, you come from above. Aim for the exposed neck actuators. Total synchronization. America, you're on civilian extraction. The moment the Sentinels cluster, you create a portal and get that bus out of the hot zone. It was a complex, multi-layered plan that required perfect timing. In the booth, the real Eli Bradley watched, his arms still crossed, but a flicker of something new in his eyes. Respect. Wiccan now! Izuku commanded. Down below, Billy's avatar unleashed a wave of shimmering blue energy that washed over the Sentinels. For a moment, their red eyes flickered and dimmed. They stumbled, their plasma cannons lowering as their targeting data turned to junk. As Izuku predicted, they moved into a tight, defensive circle. Go! Patriot and Hulkling moved as one. Eli slid across the pavement, his shield a blur of red, white, and blue, crashing through the robotic ankles of two Sentinels. At the same instant, Hulkling dropped from the sky like a thunderbolt, his fists smashing into the Sentinels' necks with devastating force. America Chavez punched a star-shaped hole in reality, and the holographic bus full of civilians vanished, reappearing a safe half-mile away. 4 of the 6 Sentinels were down or disabled in less than 10 seconds. Hawkeye, detonate! The explosive arrow on the water tower blew, sending thousands of gallons of water cascading down onto the 2 remaining Sentinels. They short-circuited spectacularly, sparks flying from their joints as they seized up and collapsed. The simulation ended. The final score flashed on the screen. Threats neutralized June 6. Civilian casualties 0. Property damage 12%. Team status optimal. The observation booth was silent for a full 10 seconds. Teddy was beaming. Billy looked like he just witnessed a magic trick. America gave a slow, appreciative nod. Izuku finally let out a breath he didn't realize he'd been holding, slumping back in the chair, the adrenaline draining away. He looked at Kate, his expression uncertain, awaiting her verdict. Kate Bishop stared at the results on the screen, then at the exhausted but determined young man in the command chair. She walked over to him, and for a moment, Izuku thought she was going to criticize him again. Instead, she put a hand on his shoulder. That, she said, her voice laced with a respect that was more valuable than any praise, is leadership. She looked back at the rest of her team, a genuine, confident smile on her face for the first time that day. Friday, save that simulation protocol. Call it the Hero Analysis Protocol. I have a feeling we're going to be using it a lot. She then turned back to Izuku, her expression serious once more, but with the ice gone. You have a brilliant strategic mind, Midoriya. One of the best I've ever seen, but your instincts in the field are a liability. You have to learn to trust your team. You have to learn to lead from the front without becoming the only thing standing in the way. You have to learn that the most important person you need to save is yourself. Because we can't afford to lose you. It was a lesson Izuku Midoriya, the boy who had inherited the will to save everyone, was only just beginning to understand. He was not just a shield. He was a sword, a strategist, a leader. And here, in a new world, with a new team, he would have to learn how to be all of them at once. The days following the Danger Room simulation settled into a new, tentative rhythm. The overt suspicion that had clouded the air around Izuku had largely dissipated, replaced by a complex cocktail of curiosity, respect, and a lingering, well-founded anxiety. He was no longer just the anomaly in the medbay. He was the architect of the Hero Analysis Protocol, a name that had stuck, much to his embarrassment. Kate had him running the team through simulations daily, pitting them against increasingly complex scenarios drawn from Avengers archives. Ultron invasions, Hydra incursions, even a hypothetical Doombot assault on Central Park. In the command chair, Izuku was a prodigy. He saw the battlefield not as a chaotic brawl, but as a multi-layered chessboard. He learned the nuances of his new team with the same obsessive detail he had once reserved for pro heroes in Japan. He memorized the exact tensile strength of Kate's bowstring, the casting time for 17 of Billy's most common spells, the precise decibel range at which Eli's shield would resonate harmfully. He wasn't just giving orders, he was optimizing them, turning the team's individual talents into a cohesive and brutally efficient symphony of power. The change in the team was palpable. Their movements became sharper, their banter less frictional, their teamwork more intuitive. They were starting to think like he did, anticipating each other's moves, covering weaknesses before they could be exploited. Eli, though still gruff, would listen to Izuku's pre-mission briefings with an undivided, critical attention that was the highest form of praise the young soldier could offer. But outside the danger room, Izuku was adrift. The strategic certainty he possessed in combat scenarios evaporated, leaving behind the lost, lonely boy from another world. He would spend hours in the mansion's library, poring over history books and archives, trying to understand the strange, hero-scarce world he now inhabited. He learned about Captain America, a man whose heroic spirit felt so achingly familiar, a symbol of hope much like All Might. He read about Tony Stark, a genius who built his heroism from scratch, much like Izuku's own support gear mentors. Yet, the stories were always tinged with a tragedy and public distrust he found unsettling. These heroes were revered, but also feared. They were saviors, but also weapons. It was a darker, more cynical world than the one he had fought to protect. During these quiet moments, the ghosts of his past were his only companions. The weight of One for All felt different here. The vestiges were quiet, their voices muted, as if they too were struggling to find their bearings in a reality that wasn't their own. Sometimes, late at night, when the mansion was silent save for the hum of the arc reactor, he would sit in the darkness of his room and try to reach them, to feel the reassuring presence of All Might or Nana Shimura. But they felt distant, like echoes across a vast, empty ocean. His power, too, felt strange. In his world, One for All had been a roaring bonfire. Here, it was a contained star, a core of immense energy that seemed to push against the very fabric of the universe around him. Billy had explained it as metaphysical friction, his paradoxical energy grinding against the established laws of their reality. This constant, low-level strain was the source of the danger, the wound that their mysterious observer was watching. It also meant that every time Izuku used his power, he felt a subtle, unnerving resistance, as if the world itself was trying to reject his actions. It was during one such quiet afternoon that the peace was shattered. Izuku was in the rooftop garden with Teddy, helping him stake his tomato plants. It was a simple, grounding task that soothed the storm in his mind. The sun was warm, a gentle breeze rustled the leaves, and for a few minutes, he could almost forget he was a million realities away from home. Then it happened. A sensation, sharp and cold as a needle of ice, plunged directly into the base of his skull. It wasn't a sound, it wasn't a sight, it was a pure, instinctual wrongness. Danger sense. Heikid Shinomori's quirk, the fourth user's legacy, erupted in his mind with a violence he had never experienced before. In Japan, it had been a subtle thrum, a gentle warning of incoming attacks, a spider sense for physical threats. This was different. This was a psychic scream. It wasn't just warning him of danger to his body. It was screaming about a danger to his very existence, to the flow of time around him. His vision swam, and for a split second, the world seemed to flicker, the vibrant green of the tomato leaves flashing to a dead, withered brown and back again. Izuku? Are you okay? Teddy asked, dropping his trowel, his face etched with concern. You look like you've seen a ghost. Something's coming, Izuku gasped, stumbling back, his hands flying to his head as if to quiet the alarm bell ringing within it. Something wrong. Before Teddy could respond, the klaxon blared throughout the mansion. Friday's voice, usually calm, was clipped with an urgency that sent a chill down their spines. Team alert. Unidentified energy signature has just manifested in Central Park. The signature is anomalous. High levels of chronoradiation detected. Team, I advise extreme caution. Kate's voice immediately cut in over the team-wide comms, already in command mode. Let's go, let's go. Meet in the atrium in 30. Izuku, you stay put. But Izuku was already moving, his earlier hesitation and melancholy burned away by the raw, primal certainty of danger sense. No, he said, his voice hard as he ran for the door. I have to be there. Whatever it is, it's here for me. They arrived in Central Park via one of America's star portals, stepping out onto the great lawn. The scene was bizarre. The usual throng of tourists and sunbathers were gone, having fled from the object that now stood in the center of the field. It was not a creature of flesh and blood. It was a being of polished chrome and obsidian angles, roughly humanoid in shape but utterly alien in design. It stood about 8 feet tall, its limbs unnaturally long and thin, ending in blade-like fingers. It had no discernible face, only a smooth, featureless plate of black metal. A faint, golden light pulsed from seams in its armor, and the very air around it seemed to shimmer and distort, like heat haze on a summer road. It wasn't moving. It was simply standing there, observing, as if waiting. "Okay, Friday, what are we looking at?" Kate asked, her arrow already knocked, the tip a fizzing electric charge. "Analysis is inconclusive," the AI replied. "It is robotic in nature, but its power source is not technological. It appears to be drawing energy directly from the temporal field. It is, for lack of a better term, a time machine that is also a weapon." "A chrono-assassin," Billy whispered, his hands already glowing with protective wards. "The thing we felt watching us. It's Kang's." Izuku's danger sense was a continuous, high-pitched scream in his mind, focused entirely on the silent chrome figure. But it was fractured, confusing. The assassin was standing still, yet his quirk was telling him it was simultaneously lunging from the left, attacking from behind, and not even there at all. It was a cacophony of contradictory warnings. "Be careful," Izuku said, his voice tight. "Its position isn't stable. It's moving in time." "Right, timey-wimey stuff." "Got it," Kate grunted, never one for esoteric explanations. "Eli, Teddy, you're on point. Get in its face, draw its fire. Billy, containment. America, be ready to punch it into next week. I'll provide cover. Let's move." The team spread out, their movements practiced and efficient from their simulations. Eli and Hulkling charged forward, a classic shield and fist combination. Eli went low, his shield raised to absorb any attack, while Teddy flew in from above, his massive green fist clenched, aiming to pulp the robot's head. It should have been a devastating, fight-ending combination. Instead, it was utterly useless. Just as Teddy's fist was about to connect, the chrono-assassin shimmered. For a fraction of a second, its chrome body seemed to decay, rusting and crumbling into dust before resolving back into its pristine state. Teddy's punch passed straight through the space it had occupied, his momentum carrying him into the empty air behind it. At the same time, Eli's shield met nothing but grass. The assassin hadn't dodged. It had simply not been there when the attacks arrived. "It's rewinding its own timeline," Billy shouted, his eyes wide with horrified understanding. "It lets us attack, then it rewinds itself a microsecond into the past to a point before the attack connects." The assassin retaliated. It raised one of its bladed hands, and a beam of distorted, shimmering energy shot out. It wasn't light or plasma. It was pure time. The beam struck a large oak tree near the edge of the lawn. The ancient tree visibly withered, its leaves turning brown, its branches curling and decaying into dust in the span of a single second, aged into oblivion. "Don't let that hit you!" Kate yelled, firing her arrow. The electrical bolt flew straight and true, aimed for the assassin's chest. But halfway to its target, the arrow suddenly corroded, the metal turning to rust, the fletching disintegrating. It fell to the ground in a shower of dust, 100 years of decay happening in an instant. The assassin had projected a field of accelerated time. They were completely outmatched. Every attack was obsolete before it landed. Every projectile aged to nothingness. Billy tried to weave a containment spell, but the magical constructs unraveled as their temporal stability was compromised. America threw a punch that should have shattered a mountain, but the assassin simply sidestepped it, not by moving its body, but by moving a second into the future where the punch had already missed. "This is impossible," Eli growled, his shield the only thing that seemed to resist the temporal aging effect, though each blocked blast sent a jarring, dissonant chime through the vibranium. "How do you fight something that isn't even in the same second as you are?" Izuku watched, his mind racing, trying to process the flood of useless information from danger sense. The quirk wasn't just warning him of danger, it was showing him the assassin's potential timelines, all at once. The contradictory signals weren't a malfunction. They were data. He just had to learn how to read them. He closed his eyes, forcing himself to ignore the visual chaos of the battle and focus entirely on the internal scream of the quirk. He tried to separate the signals. The sharp, immediate spike was a physical attack in the present. The low, humming dread was a future threat coalescing. The faint, phantom echo was an attack that had already been rewound. It was a new language, the language of temporal combat. The assassin turned its attention to him. It recognized its target. It raised both hands, preparing to fire a beam of energy powerful enough to age him into a fossilized skeleton. Danger sense screamed. Not with 100 conflicting signals, but with one, single, crystal-clear premonition. A vision of his own death, 1.5 seconds in the future. He didn't have time to think. He only had time to react, to trust the new language his quirk was speaking. One for all, 20%. The power surged through him. He didn't use it to attack. He used it to speak. America! He yelled, his voice a commanding crackle that cut through the battlefield noise. Punch the space 3 feet to my left. Do it in exactly 2 seconds. Trust me, America, busy dodging a wave of temporal distortion, didn't hesitate. She was used to trusting impossible commands from him in the simulations. She planted her feet, her fists glowing with cosmic power. Billy! Izuku shouted, his eyes still closed. Shield that exact spot. Right now! Reinforce it with everything you have. Billy, seeing the logic of shielding a point of future impact, threw all his will into it. A shimmering, multifaceted dome of brilliant blue magic erupted over the empty patch of grass Izuku had indicated. Eli! On my mark, throw your shield. Aim for the center of Billy's dome. Mark! Eli, without question, spun and hurled his shield. The vibranium disc flew like a guided missile, aimed not at the assassin, but at the empty space protected by the magic dome. The sequence of events was utterly nonsensical. America was preparing to punch empty air. Billy was shielding nothing. Eli had thrown his shield at a friendly target. To the chrono assassin, their actions were illogical, irrelevant. Its temporal processors marked them as wasted energy. Its focus remained on its primary target, Izuku. It fired its beam, and in that instant, Izuku's plan unfolded. He used 20% to leap, not away from the beam, but directly into the path he had predicted for the assassin. He wasn't dodging where it was. He was moving to where it was going to be. The assassin, to counter Izuku's sudden movement, did exactly what his danger sense had foreseen. It shifted its own timeline, teleporting 1.7 seconds into its own future to intercept him. It reappeared in a flicker of golden light at the exact spot Izuku had sent America's punch, inside the protective bubble of Billy's shield, and directly in the path of Eli's incoming shield. It had no time to react. Boom! America's fist, charged with the power to shatter dimensions, connected with its target. She didn't hit the assassin itself, but the space it occupied, the resulting shockwave of raw force acting like a cosmic hammer blow. Crack! At the same millisecond, Billy's shield, which had been designed to block the attack, instead acted as an anvil, containing the blast and focusing it inwards. The assassin was trapped between an unstoppable force and an immovable object. Clang! Eli's shield arrived at that precise moment, striking the already compromised assassin square in the chest. The combined kinetic force of a supersoldier's throw, amplified by the focused shockwave of America's punch, was too much for its chronal systems to handle. The chrono assassin staggered back, its chrome armor cracking, golden light pouring from the fissures. Its temporal abilities sputtered. It tried to rewind, to jump, to escape, but its core was fractured. For the first time since the fight began, it was locked in the present, vulnerable. But it wasn't finished. With a final, desperate act, it focused all its remaining energy into its bladed fingers and lunged at the closest target, Izuku. Izuku was ready. His danger sense had warned him this was coming. The assassin was fast, but it was predictable now. He didn't meet the attack with a smash. That would be too slow, too crude. He needed something to hold it, to pin it in place. His arm shot out, fingers splayed. Black whip! Thick, volatile tendrils of black energy erupted from his arm. They weren't the wild, untamed whips of his early days. These were focused, controlled, each one moving with sentient purpose. They snaked through the air, bypassing the assassin's flailing blades, and wrapped around its limbs and torso, pulling tight. The dark energy of Black Whip seemed to sizzle against the assassin's golden chrono field, a clash of two strange and powerful forces. The assassin was anchored. Trapped. Exposed. Teddy, now! Izuku roared, straining to hold the thrashing machine. Full power! Shatter it! Hulkling, who had been circling above waiting for an opening, descended like a meteor. There was no finesse, no strategy left. This was just raw, righteous fury. His eyes glowed, and his body swelled with the cosmic might of his Kree-Skrull heritage. Get away from my friend! He bellowed, his voice a shockwave in itself. His fist, the size of a small car and glowing with a faint green energy, connected with the ensnared chrono assassin. The impact was not a clang of metal, but a deep, resonant crunch, like a bell being struck so hard it shatters. The assassin's body imploded, its chrome form collapsing inward before exploding in a shower of glittering, golden dust and inert metal fragments. The explosion washed over them, harmless and beautiful. The shimmering distortions in the air vanished. The oppressive silence of warp time was replaced by the distant sounds of the city, the chirping of birds, the rustle of wind in the trees. It was over. Silence descended upon the great lawn, broken only by the heaving breaths of the 5 heroes. They were scattered across the field, looking at the spot where the assassin had been, then at each other, then finally at Izuku. He stood in the center of it all, Black Whip retracting back into his arm, his body still humming with the residue of One for All. He was breathing hard, the mental strain of interpreting his quirk in 4 dimensions having left him more exhausted than any physical fight. The victory had been messy. It had been chaotic and terrifyingly close. But it had been a victory. And it hadn't been his alone. He hadn't thrown a single punch at the main target. He hadn't landed a single smash. He had trusted them. He had used his mind, his unique perception, to turn his team into a weapon that could strike across time. He had been the strategist. Eli Bradley walked over, picking up his shield from the grass. He looked at the dissipating golden dust, then at Izuku. The ever-present skepticism on his face was gone, replaced by something Izuku had never seen there before, unequivocal respect. How in the hell, Eli said, his voice a low, amazed rumble, did you know that would work? Izuku looked down at his own hands, then back at his team, who were now gathering around him. He finally had an answer. Not just for Eli, but for himself. I didn't, he admitted, a small, weary smile touching his lips. But I knew you would.